A foggy morning blankets a parking lot, with faint sunlight piercing through. White paint streaks the asphalt, faded and blotchy after last night's rain. A grey pickup truck sits in the far corner, engine still humming softly despite the headlights being off a steady rhythm like the heartbeat of the man inside. His hand clenches the steering wheel, knuckles taut and veins visible. His eyes fixate on the red brick building ahead, its large door shut, still and heavy, waiting for him to walk through. On the passenger seat, a stack of papers and a cold cup of coffee ringed with condensation. Beside them, a thick file folder with a crumpled corner, as if it's been picked up and set down hundreds of times. Inside the cab, silence hangs thick, so dense even the ticking of the dashboard clock is audible. He breathes in deep, but the breath comes out quick, ragged. Outside, a truck whooshes by, its draft shaking the side mirror, snapping him back to reality. In that moment, he closes his eyes, an act of retreat from what's about to come. A low, steady voice begins his inner monologue. Loneliness is bearable, but this moment, right before the courthouse doors open, crushes the hearts of many men. Not because they are weak, but because they know once they step through, nothing will ever be the same. There is no going back. He kills the engine, opens the door. His shoes hit the pavement with a sharp, dry thud that echoes off the brick walls. Each step feels heavier than the last, but he keeps walking. The courthouse steps seem taller than usual, stretched by the weight of courage. His hand reaches the door, handle its creak echoes loud and eerie. The door opens, and a sterile white light spills out, swallowing him whole into another world. Inside, everything changes instantly. The courtroom is cold and bright, fluorescent lights bathing rows of wooden benches. The smell of paper and old wood hangs in the air. Every sound is amplified, the tap of a shoe, the rustle of a page. He sits on the petitioner's bench, back straight, hands resting on his thighs, already slick with sweat. Ahead, thick documents stacked neatly on the table. The attorney bows over notes, then looks up, speaking quickly as if time is scarce. Legal terms drone on: community, property, spousal support, custody arrangement. They sound like coded language, each word thudding dryly against the hardwood floor. He glances across the room. On the other table sit strangers, yet they now hold the narrative of his life. From the bench above, the judge sits stern, tapping the gavel, the sound reverberating until the room falls silent. A cold number flashes in his mind, something friends have mentioned. Over 70% of divorces in the U.S. are initiated by women. 8 out of 10 children stay with their mothers. That number weighs like stone when he pictures his son's sleeping face. The hearing drags. The clerk reads line by line, voice steady like a ticking clock. Every question tossed at him is recorded, every answer noted. When the temporary ruling is declared, he bows his head. The room falls silent, only the gavel's final strike remains. He gathers the papers, rises. Footsteps echo in the now emptier room. The door shuts behind him with a dry finality that follows him down the hall. He gasps, not in relief, but as if a weight has been lifted only to reveal another still pressing. Outside, the sunlight is blinding. He squints. The city hums with horns and voices. Slowly, he walks to his car. An imaginary camera pans behind him, capturing the long shadow he casts on the concrete. He enters the driver's seat, starts the engine. It hums, but he doesn't drive. The scene fades into night. A quiet road unfolds, streetlights flickering across the windshield, illuminating his face in waves of yellow. Inside, silence thickens until even his breath is audible. He drives through quiet suburbs, streetlights sweeping across the windshield. With each beam of light, his face appears, then disappears again. The engine fades in his ears. Only his own thoughts remain. And one question repeats: what is my worth, if all that's left is on paper? Many middle-aged men grew up with a firm definition of worth. Work hard, provide for the family, protect the home. It wasn't a role, it was instinct. So when they stand in divorce court, it feels less like punishment and more like dissection of identity. Every mention of support or custody isn't just about money or rights, it's about their entire lives being quantified and measured. Mike once shared that feeling, a 52-year-old motorcycle mechanic from Denver, 25 years without missing a day of work. Sold his first edition Harley, his prized possession, just to pay legal fees. That night, he returned to his rented house, flipped the light switch. Still dark. No one called his name. No dinner. Only an old photo on the shelf, him and his son, grinning during a summer camping trip. Mike sat on the couch, didn't turn on the TV, didn't play music. Just sat there for over an hour, holding the picture, staring into a space that no longer existed. Divorce isn't like a breakup. For those who built their identity around the role of protector, it's a trial of the soul. They didn't commit a crime, yet here they are, having to prove they're still worthy to be a father, a man, a part of something they once called home. The cruel part is, what once was quiet, expressed through action, now must be spelled out, defended, documented, like assets. That's when they realize the deepest pain isn't losing someone. It's being stripped of the right to be who they were. A father, a husband, a man whose laugh once filled the kitchen. The court doesn't take that away directly, but it makes them question whether they ever deserved it. The clock ticks, slow, heavy, like the air itself has thickened. The screen darkens. He's sitting at the kitchen table, half a plate of cold food in front of him, TV on, but no one watching. An empty chair across the table. Yellow light casts his shadow over the surface, touching a crooked chopstick. No words, just the sound of a spoon on a plate, and his breath so soft it seems to apologize for existing. But in those hollow moments, the man begins to hear what he used to ignore, his own voice, asking a question he's never dared to ask. If I'm no longer a husband, no longer a full-time father, then who am I? He eats alone. The food is cold, untouched. The fridge door's ajar. The yellow light overhead stretches his shadow across the kitchen floor. The TV murmurs in the next room, no one watching. Just noise to hold off the silence. News loops. Sitcoms echo from a world that no longer matches his own. Strangely, the loneliness of that moment, though empty, though it tightens his throat, feels easier than what he faced that morning. It's not a stabbing pain. It's a long, dull ache, like needles pressing into dignity. Like hearing a judge speak of visitation schedules in a voice stripped of empathy. No echo of the nights he stayed up with a fevered child. Fatherhood, once instinctive, now dictated like a contract, with conditions and limits. 3 visits a week. Pick up at 4. Return by 8. No visiting the mother's home without notice. He nods. Because resistance might make things worse. Not for him, for the child. That afternoon, he drives his son back. The boy's asleep in the back seat, clutching a toy. Every turn prompts the father to glance back, just to make sure he's still there, still safe, and maybe to trick himself into believing he still gets to take his son home. At the last intersection, just minutes away, he turns up the volume. An old country song blares familiar, but today it serves only one purpose: to drown out the sound of his own sighs. Because if it's too quiet, he's afraid he'll hear his heart breaking. A voiceover returns soft, honest. Loneliness can become an ally. But fear of court, that's the terror of losing control over your own life. Not because you didn't try, but because your efforts are being measured by things that never defined you. The music fades, the scene dims, streetlights flicker, only footsteps remain. And then, like a ray of hope, the next morning reappears. Same parking lot, same truck, but this time, his gaze doesn't fall. A new journey awaits, not to fight someone, but to reclaim himself piece by piece. Morning light streams through the windshield, reflecting softly on the steering wheel. A cool breeze brushes his face as he pushes open the community center door. No more cold fluorescent courtroom lights. Instead, warm yellow glows, cushioned chairs, and silent nods that say, "You're not alone." He doesn't speak at the first meeting, sits in the back, fingers laced. On the table, black coffee, biscuits, handwritten notes. One by one, others share. Different stories. Same undertone. Disorientation, loss, confusion in familiar places. He listens, just listens. But every word seems to touch something he had buried. No one tries to fix each other. No advice, just presence. Week 3, he speaks. Voice low, steady. "I didn't think I needed help. Until one night, I picked up the phone and realized I didn't know who to call." A few chuckles, not mocking, understanding. From then, he shifts his rhythm. Mornings begin with coffee he makes for himself. No more endless scrolling, soft music, short reads. He starts jotting down things to say to his ex-wife. No more reactive emails, no more angry replies. Just intention, less emotion, more respect. Calls about his son become easier. No more jabs, no more defense, just clarity. His time with his child matters, and all energy should go there. Evenings at the park, cooking dinner together, nothing flashy, just presence. He begins caring about mental health, something he once thought was irrelevant. Signs up for a small gym, starts light. Each day, the sweat helps, teaches him to breathe even in tough meetings. He tries meditation just 5 minutes each morning, but enough to clear mental fog. Then he sees a therapist. First session, he doesn't know where to begin, but the therapist doesn't ask about the past, doesn't force him. They sit in silence. Slowly, he chooses to speak. None of this makes life perfect, but it gives him back what he lost, a sense of control. One afternoon, leaving the community center, he steps into the Sunday light, hits his face. He squints, but this time, he looks up. A faint smile, not wide, but real. Not because everything is fine, but because, for the first time, he feels he's going the right way. The screen fades, engine starts, soft music rises, no narration needed. The audience knows, this isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new life, simpler maybe, but honest, and strong enough to keep going. There are turns in life that grip your chest, no matter how ready you think you are. Court is one of them. Not because of verdicts, but because things you thought were forever must now be divided by law. But remember, a turn isn't the end. It's just a different stretch of road where you must slow down, steady the wheel, then move forward. There are still chapters unwritten, quiet mornings, honest laughs, conversations yet to begin, and more importantly, you're not the only one who's been afraid, who's fallen. The difference is you chose to rise. If this story resonates, share it. No fancy words, just let another man somewhere know he's not alone, that there's still light, still laughter, still reasons to live. Your share might be the bridge that pulls someone from the dark, and sometimes one small light is enough to warm an entire night.